So first things first, Ian, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
It's very good to hear. Now, before we get into the new 6x6 album, I would like to jump back to your early days, if that's okay. Now, I want to start with a quote that I read, and this was kind of in reference to 6x6, but you said something along the lines of really wanting or have been wanting to be in a power trio band. And thinking back of all those power trios that were big as you were coming up in music, Cream, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Taste. What is it about a power trio that's so exciting to you?
Well, it's the three people, and the onus is on the guitar. There's not a lot of other things in the way. It gives you a lot of freedom. It's just a great thing to be able to go out there and play to a large audience with three people. It's always been sort of a dream to me. I mean, I've enjoyed playing in Saga, of course, but
Sure.
yeah, that's been in the background, in the head.
But are those the bands that you grew up with and tried to emulate early in your kind of guitar education?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I started in 1969, really. Yeah, Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, of course.
Sure.
Uh, even Eric Clapton. I think Eric Clapton was the very first guitar player I heard playing any kind of leads back in the 60s. And it really kind of hooked me. I you can't really explain it, it was just really got into my blood. So yeah, him. And then it went on to bands like Gentle Giant, John McLaughlin, Mahavishnu Orchestra, and
Okay.
all these things. Yeah.
And how did you kind of figure out what you as a guitarist wanted to convey or in your playing? Did you figure that out early on?
Relatively, yeah. I mean, I started putting my finger against vinyl records to slow them down so I could kind of figure out a lick and figure out guitaring. Of course, the tone goes down when you put your thumb against the thing. So, it was really a process. And I think when I got to about 15 years old, 16, I noticed that Jeff Beck, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, they all sounded different. So I had this thought in my head that, you should make your own sandwich, you should really follow, give that up and go your own way. And that was the start of that. So just figuring out all my own licks. Once I knew my way around the guitar with octaves and all that kind of stuff, I started practicing a lot. Kept me out of trouble as a kid.
But
you know?
you do allude to something interesting, which nowadays we have the internet and we can look up every chord scale. We can look up how to play any song in the world, pretty much. But back in
Yeah.
the day, you didn't have that. So there was a real, from what I can tell in talking to musicians, there had to be somewhat of an obsession almost. How did as you mentioned, practicing. Did you really fall in love with the craft in that way and kind of really devoted a lot of your time to it?
I did. It was almost an addiction when I was a teenager. All my friends were out doing drinking and partying and all that stuff.
Mm,
And I'd be back in my bedroom, trying to figure out on some old shitty guitar. I had a Guild semi acoustic that was
okay.
about the same size as me, you know, and big wooden bridge. And I didn't use a pick. And when I broke a string, I would try to repair that string because I didn't have any
Okay.
money. Right. I used to go down and when I was like 14, 13, 14 years old, go down and hang around the venues and wait for the crew to show up. I did that for Jeff Beck at Massey Hall in Toronto in
Okay.
1972. And I said, "Hey guys, you need help?" And I had really long hair down to my waist. I was just this little kid. And they went, "Sure, kid." So I helped Jeff Beck stuff all on the stage in Massey Hall. And I brought in all the monitors and faced them towards the audience. And they all laughed at me and said, "No, no, kid, that's a monitor for the bands to hear." Oh, okay. And then they let me in for the show.
Did you kind of, you were 15 years old around that time you mentioned, did you kind of know that music was the path for you and that would become your life in a sense?
Well, I didn't really, I mean, I didn't really think about it, but I was
Okay.
definitely going that way. I,
Okay.
I didn't really think that's what I want to do forever. But on the other hand, I did. I didn't really openly say that to myself, and it just became, well, I just couldn't give it up. It's worse than cigarettes.
But what I find interesting then, and as you allude to, you're a self-taught guitar player. So when did you feel like you were proficient enough to kind of share it with other people, and then ultimately ending up in SaGA, of course?
Right. Well, it was a process. I mean, being young, I wasn't in a band. I didn't know how to get in a band. I needed some experience. So I was looking in the newspaper in Toronto and going to all these weird auditions that didn't work out. Finally, I got in a band called Kickback, and it was about 2/3 cover and
Okay.
1/3 original. And we played all around Ontario and Quebec. And that's where I got my experience. Yeah, I mean, back in the 70s, you could play in a bar for a whole week from Monday to Saturday, 3 sets a night, 40-minute sets. And, you do that for a few years and you really, okay, you get used to being in front of an audience and you know what you're doing, and
Sure.
get to experiment and all that. Yeah.
Did you fall in love with, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, that was a 3-piece band too.
But did you fall in love with playing live in front of people the same way you did with the guitar?
Eventually.
Okay, okay.
you know, there's a, I mean, probably for everybody, it's a little spooky at first. Everyone's
Sure.
staring at but then you get over that. And then it becomes, and playing that much every night, you really, almost kind of miss it. Like playing concerts, it's like, it's a city here, 2 days later, another city there. You
Sure.
play for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I mean, then you're playing, all night, every night. And you're really trying different things and having, really getting your chops together. I miss that a little bit, a lot of playing, but hey, that's the way it goes.
When did you start putting kind of guitar ideas or certain things you wrote aside for potential future use?
That's always been the case.
Okay.
I mean, since 1990, the beginning of SaGA, I think the first 3 albums of guitar, I didn't really have any experience in recording at all. I mean, my brother was older, Jim, and the other guys were much older. Peter Rochon was 10 years older than me. I was only 20. And, where do I plug in, right? It was done with expertise, but not mine, and first 3 records were a little guitar light, there were a lot of emphasis on the new Moogs and the new sounds and all these new things coming out. And I think by Worlds Apart, I really went, hey guys, and the guitars started coming out Worlds Apart, On the Loose, all that. And it continued up until 1990, Secretive Illusion, where I wrote a lot of that. It's a lot of guitar on that record. And we always, like Jim Gilmore and myself, always brought at least 30 song ideas to the table when we started SaGA record since 1990. And a lot of those songs don't get recorded, but I keep them. I mean, they're not all doable, but they all got good parts and things like that to be kept for later and stuff.
Sure.
Which really ended up me giving a lot of this stuff to Robert Berry in 6x6 and making these songs because he's such a good arranger. Robert is an amazing arranger.
What makes him such a good arranger, and what made kind of the chemistry between you and then Nigel, of course, as well, made it so easy to get along and just play music together?
Yeah. Well, that kind of thing just happened naturally, right?
Okay.
I mean, you either get along or you don't. And it really clicked. Working with Robert right out the bat, I sent him some stuff. He sent me something back and I went, wow, holy, because he's got, he's a lead singer and I'm not. So in, a songwriting sort of mode, if you're going to have lyrics, it's better to know where you're going and all that stuff. So that, that's where Robert really came together with that. And Nigel's heavy metal. So, it's an odd threesome, because Robert is progressive rock. I'm kind of both worlds, and Nigel's heavy metal. So,
But it does. This is interesting because listening, especially to the new album, the songs are very diverse in a way, but they do still feel like they fit together. I mean, maybe it's just Steve's voice, maybe it's the drumming and the guitar playing that ties everything together. But how do you see that kind of uh, musical identity that the band is kind of creating now?
Well, I think it just naturally, came together once again. I mean, on the record, when I listened to back the new record, I listened to Robert Berry's bass playing, and between his bass playing and my guitar playing, we're loosely tight. I mean, he's always doing a little something different. He's not following my licks, and it's sort of magical to me. you know I really like personally like a psychedelic sort of record. I really would like to do a record like that with licks and all that stuff, but have a magic to it, rather than nowadays I hear a lot of guitar players, speed playing and all that stuff.
Sure.
And I really like to have a melody and something you can feel. So I like to play fast, but not all the time. It just when it needs to be in my world.
No, that I do think that shows on the album because there are so many, even within songs, so many dynamics and different textures that you get out of the guitar. Was that kind of a concerted effort to make the get the most out of the guitar, if that makes sense?
No, really, when it comes down to actually really recording, I think about the sections and where they should go. And then, I spend time, getting a sound that I want for that. Live, I'll be switching back and forth, just, back one switch on the floor. But yeah, it really, I think the part of the song calls for a certain thing in my head,
Mm.
and then I come up with that.
And then-
Well, it's really with miking cabinets and cross between that and going direct. I'm using this. I use diesel amplifier, Herbert, also Amp One by Thomas Blug. It's a 100-watt tube head. And you can go direct out of that. And I use a combination of that. So the diesel's got all the weight and heavy, and that's got a front mic. I use 57 Sures, in the back and the front.
Okay.
And then also I will be using the Amp One. But when I'm writing music, I don't spend a lot of time making a great sound. Basically, I'll just sit here and turn up the guitar, start doing stuff. Okay, that feels good. I like that. I record it. Worry about it later for a record, if it makes a record.
Sure, sure. So you
Something
still,
like that.
so I can assume you still have a backlog of many ideas that potentially can be used.
I do. Yeah, I have a lot of stuff here. That's it's like your computer becomes like a messy purse. There's folders everywhere, and you got to go find something.
What do you, especially if we sorry, if we take the album, then what was the selection criteria? What did you want this particular album to convey?
Well, the best music we come up as possible as a record.
Sure.
Um, basically, just wrote the best stuff that we had at the time. I was touring all last year too, so it was quite difficult to fit in and fly down and all that stuff. I'm going back down there this Sunday to
Okay.
California. But yeah, I mean, Robert did a lot of work. And I was in and out. I was, so I'm very happy the way it turned out. I was a little worried because I was so busy, but I like to work. So
Oh, that's good to hear. But you raised an important point, which is that all three of you have very busy careers and you have other things outside of this band. So figuring out the logistics of it all, is that tricky?
it is. Yeah, like touring is tricky.
Okay.
So ever since COVID, and basically not just promoters, but everybody, hotels, flights, everything lost money.
Sure.
Getting out there is a little difficult, but it's looking good. It's looking good for September.
Okay.
So Nigel's on tour right now with Judas Priest,
Okay.
and you know, he's busy. I have a lot of sort of time. We have one big fall SAGA tour starting in November, but outside of that, you know, we just finished 4 shows in Europe. I got back on Monday. Next month I have 2 shows.
Mm.
The month after that, 1 show. So I've got a lot of time myself.
Okay.
But you're right, it is mixed up. I mean, Nigel's pretty busy. So we're looking at September. You know, we want to get out, get to Europe. I think there's about 4 shows we can do. I'm working on right now. And then come back down and play Prague Stock around New York City.
Okay.
And then San Juan, Puerto Rico, I think. We're number 5 on AZ Rock Radio and have been for 4 months.
Oh,
So
wow.
really pleased about that, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. But that the intention was always the tour, right? Am I right in saying that?
The intention was touring, yeah.
Yeah. No, okay, because when a band gets started and in the middle of a pandemic, obviously that brings along with it some difficulties. But it's good to know that the intention was always to tour and to bring it out to the people because from what I can gather, people are really looking forward to seeing you guys play live as well.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, you have to get out there and play live to make it real as a stamp. Otherwise, you're a record band, you know.
Right.
So, you know, it has had its challenges, but yeah, we'll get out there.
Another thing I find very interesting about the band is that I think collectively decided not to play any of the songs of your other bands, that you wanted to focus on writing new music and bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah.
How come? And what makes kind of this band then special in terms of songwriting for you?
Well, it is a departure from SaGa and Saxon,
Sure.
and and I wanted that too. You know, I mean, you know, I wanted to change. I wanted this 3-piece band and see where it's going to go and all that stuff. You know, I mean, I didn't want to sound like SaGa. I think there's little elements in there at points. You can't really help it. I mean, I've been in the band so long, right?
Sure.
But yeah, no, we wanted to make our own sandwiches.
If you go through the album, is there one song that you're particular? Obviously, you like them all, but is there one that you're particularly content with how especially your parts turned out?
SaGa?
No, from Beyond Shadowland.
Oh, yeah, I am actually. I'm very proud. I mean, the first song, Wren, I wrote that, and I really wanted something that when you go to a show, even though you haven't heard the song, you're gonna start grooving because Wren has got 3 rhythmic parts to it. When it's listen to the music part, the chorus, there's a 16th like triple like dip it, and I'm going da 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 da, and Robert's going dun da dun da da, and it just makes this, you know, whole you got to start moving thing. I really like that kind of stuff that grooves, so it's not so scientific, you know, it's not really tricky and scientific. It's just something that's really gets you going. So I really like that. Spectre, I was very proud of that solo. Yeah, it just kind of happened. It felt great, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, Spectre is one that
Doing it.
stood out for me as well. I really like the kind of the dynamics within that song.
Great.
And as a guitar player, the technical prowess versus kind of conveying a certain emotion, and you already mentioned you like to you like melody, you like to make people feel something, and then on the other end you have the technical prowess, which these days is a big part for some bands. Where do you sit, and how do you see that kind of balance between playing as fast as you can and as wild as you can to getting a certain groove and melody?
Well, for me, it's a mixture of both. It has to be,
Okay.
I put on a lot of records right now. It's like you're just pinned against the wall with, it's just full blast, all parts coming and flying and stuff like that. It's almost like you're trying to impress somebody, rather than make you feel something or say play something meaningful. So I like both worlds. You know, I like on a record maybe once burnout, one
Mm.
big sort of solo, and then go back to uh, playing music. I mean,
Yeah, you even have a couple of songs where I believe the acoustic guitar is coming in, so that kind of changes the textures and kind of the feel of the flow of the album as well, I think.
that's right. I don't think I painted myself in a corner with that because I've got the M brace that the
Mm,
nylon. It'll float on the mic stand. It'll just be there with one button. So you just hit that button, go to
okay.
electric, hit it, back to acoustic. So I can stand there and play these parts, hit the button, go right to the electric. And this record is kind of made that way. I've done that on a few songs. So
Mm.
I'm looking forward to that. That's a nice little combination.
I have one last question. Do you, well, first off, do you pay a lot of attention to the lyrics? Is that something that is important to you?
It is, but I don't write them. Robert
Sure.
does. I think he's done a fabulous job. I like what his inflections is not just pure singing. He's got a lot of little things in between the vocals and a lot of character, really.
Sure.
I really like character. And I'm actually a big fan of abstract sort of lyrics, Lucy in the sky with diamonds and stuff
Sure.
like that. I like those sort of things. So you're not painting an exact picture of something. You're painting views of images and things like that, rather than trying to jam some ideas down somebody's throat.
Right. But what I really like about the lyrics on Beyond Shadowland in particular is it feels very life affirming in a sense, or I don't know if empowering is the right word, but
Yeah.
with songs like Only You Can Decide and there is that yeah, life affirming
Yes.
side of it. Have you talked with Robert and Nigel about kind of the themes on the album and how did that come together?
Well, mainly came from Robert, really. And his view of well, we're just about to come out with another video, I think, for Obliax, and it's about leaving the planet and
Mm.
finding a better place because it is kind of messy down here on Earth,
Sure,
right? It's
sure.
getting a little weird out there, right? So that there is a lot of that on a few songs. Yeah, Robert's gone to that way.
Is it well? That brings me to this is going to be my final question, I promise. But that's an interesting thought because I've been talking with a lot of bands about longevity, and obviously Saga has been really good in terms of longevity. But especially at this point in your career, what do you think keeps artists, musicians together and working well? Because I also hear a lot of stories of people not getting along within bands and all that, and revolving door of lineups. What in your estimation, kind of, uh, yeah, makes a band dynamic great?
Keeps the glue of the people together.
Sure.
I don't really have an answer for that, but I mean, for basically you have to get along. If everyone gets along, nobody's got any big egos. That could be a problem if somebody is like that. But Robert and Nigel are great guys, great to work with. That's working fine. Um, yeah, I think in other bands there is a lot of that going on and stuff. And keeping a band together, well, you do need some success, right?
Mm,
At the end of the day. I mean, music is intangible. It could be nothing, or it could be lots, or it could be middle, as far as success goes.
sure.
And, you really do need to have it at a certain level to keep it going, right? Otherwise, you're working a lot for, nothing coming back. So, you know, that's where we get into playing live too, because with the internet, 1990 and stuff like that, all record sales,
Sure.
went down and stuff. So, everybody's on the road right now. It's saturated out there. I'm seeing bands from way back when all over the place. And the promoters tell me in any one week, a guy with money in his pocket has a choice of like 4 or 5 bands to see. And which one is he going to see? He can't see them all,
Yep.
So, that's a factor in the live playing now too. The saturation of, people, everyone out there playing, trying to get venues, they're all booked.
Right.
I mean, that's a problem, right? No, we're all booked this year,
Well,
but hey,
the way I see it, on the one hand, I'm happy that it's kind of returned, because we had a couple of years where there was no live music, and I'm glad that places are fully booked. But like you say, there is a sense of oversaturation, because the amount of albums that come out every day is just unfathomable. There's so many.
it's crazy, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, because it's the day of being okayed by a major record label, and then you get a deal, then you get a release.
Right.
That's over. It's been over for years. I mean, people can make records in their house on the computer, and and just put them all into the record stores. They're saturated with bands. So
Yeah.
with 6x6, I was really pleased to get a deal with Sony Inside Out, because it really does make a difference, for having a good rec company behind you, instead of just doing it independently. I've never done that. Yeah, so
Sure. Well, that's great to hear, and can't wait to see how the live playing will turn out, and hopefully many more albums in the future.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Robin. Yeah.